Call to order the April 13, 2017 meeting of the Sacramento Regional Solid Waste Authority. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, good afternoon. Ashby, Carr, Frost.
Here.
Guerra.
Here.
Natoli.
Here.
Cerna.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting of the Solid Waste Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Saturday, April 15th at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located at the back of chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. If you have any electronic devices, please silence them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we have the General Manager's report, and I'd like to welcome Doug Sloan as the acting General Manager. You got short shift last time and didn't get your proper introduction. So
well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
It's a real pleasure to be here today with everybody. Today we're going to share some information on some ongoing programs, including our 30% franchise recycling requirement, an update on the organic waste diversion program, and an update on our street city can collection program. Just looking ahead, I wanted to raise a couple of issues. We anticipate bringing you the preliminary budget in May along with a legislative update. There's some significant legislation out there that's affecting the organics industry and some of our franchise haulers. We want to make sure the board's aware of that. And we're also going to report on code enforcement programs that we have ongoing. And then as we look towards the summer, we plan on continuing our stakeholder meetings. Those have been very, very effective in helping us work through issues with our franchise holders. We're going to talk about some legislative issues, some diversion programs, and any other item of interest to the group. One special item, though, that we are going to talk about with the franchise meetings is AB 901. It's a law that was passed by the legislature, but Cal Recycle is still writing some of the technical language for it, and so it's a little bit of a work in progress. But we really need to engage with the franchise haulers on that because it is going to change some of the ways that we do things and some of the reporting requirements. But I want to emphasize these stakeholder meetings that we've had in the last couple of years have been extremely important to the success that we've had in the past. And we want to make sure that going forward we have good partners with our franchise holders. And then as in prior years, we anticipate coming to you in September with a final budget. And as well as working through October and November with any ordinance changes or any kind of program changes that we're going to make as a result of any of the legislation. So that gives you kind of an update on where we're headed this year. That
Great.
Concludes my report if there's any questions.
Any questions for the board? Thank you very much. We have a consent calendar. Is there a motion, or is there any questions or anything anybody wants to pull from the consent?
Move consent.
Second.
Moved by Director Cerna, second by Dr. Guerra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? And our first discussion item is election of the chair and vice chair for 2017. Do we have nominations for the chair?
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I'd like to, if I can, treat this, both the chair and the vice chair together in one motion. I'd like to move that Councilmember Eric Guerra from the City of Sacramento serve as our 2017 chair, and that my colleague, Supervisor Sue Frost, serve as vice chair.
It's not a requirement to have a second for nominations. However, I will second that nomination because it was so well done. So is that the close of nominations? Does anybody else have any nominations?
Voted.
Let's vote it before someone decides they don't want to accept it.
Okay, let's just take it anyway. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Chair. Great job.
If the clerk will read item number 5.
Yes. Item number 5 is update on meeting SWA code requirements for 30% waste diversion.
Okay, we've prepared a staff report to kind of highlight where we're at with the 30% diversion requirements. I do want to point out that we have 2 franchise haulers, California Waste Recovery Systems and USA Waste Services of Sacramento, that didn't meet the 30% requirement in the fourth quarter. We have not yet talked to USA Waste, so I don't really have an answer there, but we are trying to meet with, and we'll be meeting soon with California Waste Recovery on their percentage. Just as a general knowledge, they are in the very south part of the county, Galt, Ileton, down in that area, and they don't have a lot of customers in the area. And from their standpoint, trying to get some of the programs together, it's difficult sometimes with a small customer base. But we want to meet with them and go through the different options and see if we can't get them up to the right percentage.
Okay, are there questions from the board? Yes, Board Member Natoli.
Without question, I've had a chance to talk with Mr. Sloan about this a little bit, because they do service many rural accounts, including Herald and river communities, Walnut Grove and Ileton, as Doug said, and certainly areas in and around both west and east of Galt, and some in the Wilton and Slough House areas. And again, I think it's important for folks to do their best to meet the requirements, but I also think that we need to take into account some of the circumstances and work with them, as we would with other businesses, try to help them find a path that would come into conformance, but also not jeopardize, I think, the good service they do provide to a number of different accounts, many of them farm accounts or small business accounts, some of the marinas and other operations in the Sacramento portions of the county and the rural county. So again, I just encourage our staff to continue to meet with folks and see if they can figure this out.
Great. Other questions from the board? If not, I'd concur with Board Member Natoli that we have to encourage that we meet all of the state requirements. I mean, those are the state requirements, but having staff reach out to the haulers or that aren't meeting the requirements and having them show a plan or best effort to get to those points, I think is what we're looking for. Do we need a motion for this if it's just receive and file?
Directions.
And just direction to staff? Okay, good. Okay, then we'll go ahead and I think you've got enough direction. We'll ask the clerk to read the next item.
Okay. Your item number 6 is update on meeting regulatory requirements for organic waste diversion.
And this is an update to our organic waste diversion programs. As you know, AB 1826 changed and required more organic recycling. The board previously had included in their actions an incentive program, and so the report here is trying to address, we have 45 people or customers that were on the incentive program. They're actually not due to start the program until the following year, but they've been incentivized with working with their hauler to start the program early, so they are diverting organics, which is very positive, and we intend to continue the program through the rest of the year.
Very good. Are there questions from the board? There's no questions from the public on this. That's a receive and file as well. So if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and ask the clerk to read the next item.
Item number 7, update on street litter collection service for high pedestrian traffic areas.
So this is a staff report. We wanted to give you an idea of the City Can street program that's been downtown in and around the arena and some of the areas. For all indications, the program is working very well. We started, I believe, with 61 carts. We went up to 64, which was the extent of our inventory. And the service is 5 days a week. It's a staggered service, and it seems to be working very, very well. We did get a request from city staff. They've gotten some grant money for some recycling containers, and so we wanted to bring this to the SWA board to say, right now the service is strictly for trash, and so if there's an interest on the recycling side, we could potentially partner with the city that would purchase the cans. We did learn with the RFP that we put out for the solid waste side that we can't piggyback on that RFP or contract for recycling, so we'd have to do a whole nother RFP process on the collection of recycling. But at this point, we're interested in terms of whether or not the SWA board is interested in pursuing this.
Any questions from board members? As far as from the city side, I think it's important that we continue to look at this option. I mean, I've gone to a couple cities where they have encouraged the multiple different types of receptacles. So if there's a way we can kind of pursue that, look at some grant money to do that and encourage both the waste and recycling, I would be supportive of the staff effort to find out what the feasibility is. And my understanding is we would have to go out for another bid for that particular service.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Guerra,
Yes.
When we get to this, I wanted to return to item 6 if I could. I had a note and I'd overlooked it when we had the brief report. So when we're done with item 7, I'd like to return to item 6 if we could for a moment.
Okay. Any other questions for item number 7? If not, then I'd like to provide staff direction to work with the city to identify the how do we do recycling along with trash.
Okay, we will.
Okay, we'll go back to item number 6. Board Member Natoli.
Yes, in our written report, there is some discussion about both the incentive program that this SWA has put in place, but some requirements as it relates to diversion and folks who actually move certain products. And I would just say that, and I know we've got a meeting with staff, and one of the parties is identified in the staff report later this afternoon. But I am concerned, not so much that our staff certainly hasn't taken interest. I know working with Doug and his staff and with the Department of Environmental Management, we've had some conversations, but I am concerned that depending upon where Cal Recycle comes out on their program directives as it relates to the agricultural community in particular, a lot of folks who are farmers and ranchers that may use byproducts for feed supplements or for other purposes on their farming and ranching operations here in our county and certainly in the region, could be fairly negatively impacted by not only requirements that we may have in place because we're out a little early on some of this, but as to statewide imposition of certain things as other legislation comes forward, and we're more familiar with those rules and regulations. And so I guess I would just say to my colleagues that I've been party to at least one meeting and certainly a couple of different conversations with staff and with at least one party down in the Herald area, but there are others that, again, work with processing industries here in the suburban and urban setting, and some of them fairly large names where those byproducts, and again, may fit into certain categories, but they are very important supplements. And folks, oftentimes, if you have a farm or ranch, you move those own materials, you use your own trucks and such. And they're not necessarily haulers. Certainly, they're not our waste haulers that we would see that are running our neighborhoods and providing to business accounts. They're from source to ranch or farm. And again, that may not make a difference in the eyes of the legislation as it was characterized. But I want to say that this has raised a bit of a flag. And I don't know, Doug, if you or Ethan want to elaborate a little bit, because I am concerned, and I've had some additional conversations with others who haven't yet been brought under the umbrella, that this, I don't know that it was the intent of the legislature nor Cal Recycle and again, I trust the agricultural community was represented at least statewide in that discussion, but now we're seeing this because we've done some advanced work on our ordinance and have done some early implementation with incentives for some of the haulers. And so I don't know, Doug, if you want to elaborate. We're still in some discussions, but I think we're going to need to seek Cal Recycle's input, but also if that comes back in a way that's going to have a negative impact upon farmers and ranchers in this community, then I think it's going to be time for this board to have a conversation here about how we want to approach that, and certainly with direction to SWA staff and our respective staffs, both city or county. So,
Doug, in your comments, if you could also include, kind of the standard of what the authority's responsibility is to maintain also certain standards of odor controlled or any kind of byproducts that happen from some of these users.
Okay, if I could take Board Member Natoli's comments first. You're absolutely right. We have recognized that we have a couple of haulers, farming industry type material that were we believe should fall under the franchise agreement, and we've gotten some pushback from them on that. We are planning to meet with them actually later this afternoon. We do now have a contact at Cal Recycle that is well-versed in what Cal Recycle is requiring. And so what we want to do is have the meeting with the stakeholders that we've identified so far in this process, get their input, go back to Cal Recycle, and try and reconcile the two, and in that process. We also intend in the summer stakeholder meetings, now that we know that the net needs to be a wider net than what we've had in the past, we're going to actively look for more of the similar type businesses so that we can promote the rules and the regulations that are coming down. And specifically, one of the ones that's troubling is a little bit to me is the AB 901. So even if you're a farming operation and you aren't going to be required to have a SWA franchise, you are still going to be under 901 required to have a reporting system directly to the state. It's very different than what's happened in the past. In the past, everything has come to the SWA board, and we have collected that information from all the entities and passed that on to the state. The state's actually with 901 going directly and requiring businesses to report directly to them. Very different. And that's not anything that I think is on the radar of the local business community and the farming community.
Yeah, and if I could, I'll give some examples. And again, we have some fairly standard regulations, and we have a questionnaire for folks who have vehicles, and whether they're hauling solid waste or they're hauling, waste and debris from construction sites, whatever it might be, and to have the same level of requirement for someone who may intermittently, either on a weekly basis or a couple times a week, move materials, everything from potentially, I guess, almond hulls to remains after they've processed rice, to folks who make salads and have leafy lettuce that's available for, or day-old stale bread, whatever it is, that they've got to have a backup truck, that they've got to have X, Y, and Z. Farmers have a lot of equipment, but they're not in the business. They may be moving the material from, point A to point B, and granted, you want it, to be sanitary, and you don't want it leaking all over the highways and so forth. So I get the reasons for the regulations, but we have a pretty comprehensive, and again, this board has reviewed at least generally those documents. And I got to say, for the agricultural industry, not to necessarily give anybody a pass, but I am concerned that it puts them in a whole other category where it's part of their normal business practice, and they are helping divert it from the landfill, stuff that might otherwise, and I think part of this key is whether they get, in some cases they may purchase it. In some cases it may come to them no charge for the hauling. In other cases they may even get paid to take it. And I guess that becomes one of the litmus tests as well. But without diving into it too deep today and recognizing that we're still looking at this, I am concerned. I would just say this, that it may put a really tough position on folks who I think are doing a good service, doing it properly. There's been no allegations of that. It's just that we have this ordinance that is now, I guess, putting our arms around and say these are haulers. Well, these are not the our waste management companies, and whether they're big or small. And I think part of it was whether they should have figured out when they did the law. Well, I don't know that the farmers in Sacramento County, they may be represented through cattlemen's or through the farm bureaus, statewide organizations, and others, but I don't think this was the intent. In fact, I understand there was language actually, and there was some statements made by Cal Recycle at workshops, or during the time the legislation was being considered, that there would be some consideration for those types of operations. And so, I don't know where that puts us as it relates to certainly, actually we're meeting with some folks this afternoon, but there's been clearly some very dissatisfied people about, what was being requested by our agency, and because it really didn't, in their view, apply to them, and I would tend to agree with them in some points that it doesn't apply. And if it does, then they might as well quit farming and go, out there in competition with the folks in the audience and, start hauling, waste of one type or the other. But that's not the business they're in. And I just want to make that clear. So At any rate, Chair Guerra, thanks for the opportunity to just put that out there, because this is an evolving issue, and one way this board may get drawn in deeper is I don't know that Doug is necessarily going to have all the magic answers, recognizing obviously that there's an industry regulation that's in the state legislation, and we have a SWA ordinance. But it may need we need to revisit our ordinance, assuming we can still comport with state law. So I just want to lay that out there. Thanks.
Yes, and that's why we intend to come back in May with a legislative update, because we intend to meet with Cal Recycle on some of these issues before then, and so we're trying to give you a better picture of what's out there on the regulatory horizon and exactly how 901 is going to play out.
Yeah. Well, very good. I think there's a general interest to understand that one size doesn't fit all, but we do need to, at least in my opinion, make sure that we're also mitigating any potential kind of odor discharge issues that come before us, which is the responsibility of partly of this board and why the state issues were defined. But I think you're getting direction here that we need to express these concerns to the state agency during the drafting process of the regulations. Good. Other questions from the board on this item? And if not, then we did have a comment on item number 7 from the public. If not, then we're going to bounce back to item number 7. And we have a comment from the public. Tony Sakota, I think for Public Services here. Is it Sincata?
Yeah.
My apologies.
All good. Hey, Chair Guerra, SWA Board, Tony Sincata, Republic Services. Just want to echo kind of what Doug was saying. Downtown street can collections going great. SWA staff has been awesome to work with. We also welcome the opportunity to bid on the RFP for the recycling portion as well. So anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think, just to reiterate, I think encouraging that concept of waste separation from trash and recycling, I think it's a positive thing. So if we can get a report back on that, that would be helpful. Okay. Thanks. Okay, next, I think that's it for our agenda.
Our last item is comments from the public, and I do not have any speaker slips.
Okay, no speaker slips from the public, and so with that, we're adjourned at 3:23.